So occasionally on the ACT English, you'll have questions that require you to distinguish between things that are countable and things that are not, because there are a lot of distinctions between words that depend on this distinction in terms of whether something is countable or not. And so I'll elaborate over the course of these next few examples. This one here. Scenes during Yahav's 4-minute story, You've Got a Friend, blank, blank. So we've got two issues here, two distinct issues. One of them having to do with the verb, and then the other one having to do with this distinction here. And you might be saying, oh, this is really easy. Why are you even bothering with this? But it's just one example of many, one example of several. So the fact that we have multiple scenes, these scenes illustrate, so that's going to take care of F and H. But many versus much, what is the distinction there? Well, many is used when you have something that is countable. Much is used when you have something that is, well, an amount, something that you can't necessarily count, like I don't have as much money as I used to. Okay, but a technique is something that would be countable. She has several techniques. Maybe she uses, I don't know, it's going to describe them here. But since you can count techniques, you do want to use many, and so that is what distinguishes H from J in this one. So many refers to things that are countable. Much refers to things that are not countable, but rather, again, things that are, amounts. And we'll see some more examples, and so let's go on and look at this next example. So, McCoy invented a device that released oil while a train was in motion, substantially reducing the number of maintenance stops. Again, do we have something countable or not? Maintenance stops. Well, here, let's say that, you've got, just train stops in general. You've got station A, station B, and station C. You can count those. Or you've got the Civic Center station and the 5th Street station and the 2nd Street station or whatever. You can count them. Stops are countable. So that means we do need to use number as opposed to amount. If you said the amount of stops, I think you might hear somebody say that in spoken English, but that's not correct because amount is not correctly used to refer to something that is countable. So we can get rid of that. And then the frequency of number, that's just not idiomatic. So that's the issue with G there. So it is the number of stops. Again, a lot of times I imagine students would get this one correct without stopping to think about what the distinction there is. You might just say, amount sounds wrong. But we want to be more precise if possible. Now, 23 is a contrasting example here. It says, maintaining the nurse log requires a great blank of energy and technology. Well, energy and technology, in contrast to maintenance stops or techniques, energy and technology are not things that are countable. You can't say I have 3 energy or 2 technology. So that means that it is not a countable thing. It is not a number. It has to be an amount. So it requires a great amount of or great amounts of. And so, again, they have to sprinkle in something else, another issue, so that they can have 4 answer choices. And you don't say amount in, you say amount of. And then one more, getting us to the fewer versus less distinction, which also is a distinction involving countable versus not countable. It says here, cable cars caused fewer accidents than did buses. Okay, so always remember that when you have a comparison and you have THEN, you want to go ahead and get rid of that first so that you don't forget about it, because that's always going to be wrong in a comparison. And notice here that once we get rid of that, we don't have to distinguish between fewer and less. But let's say that we did. What would the distinction be? Well, you can count the number of accidents. There were 3 accidents as opposed to 4, or there were 2 accidents as opposed to 5, or whatever. If you can count, it's going to be fewer. That doesn't make sense there, but fewer accidents then. And I think in spoken English, people are pretty lazy about this, and they would say less accidents quite often. And you can also kind of understand it when you realize that, what's the opposite of more? Well, depends, right? Could be less, could be fewer. It doesn't matter whether it's countable or not in terms of whether you use more, you use it either way. But less has to do with amounts. Fewer has to do with numbers. Or again, things that are countable, things that are not countable. Countable. Okay, so amount versus number, less versus fewer, much versus many. Those are distinctions that will often crop up on the ACT, and so keep it in mind. If you can count it, it's going to be down here. If you can't count it, it's going to be up there.